Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, and I'm so incredibly happy to introduce you all to today's guest, Sophie Sandberg. She is an activist and artist focusing on topics such as gender, harassment, and mental health. And starting in 2016, Sophie has been creating art using sidewalk chalk to highlight harassment issues in her city and posting them on her Instagram page, Cat Calls of NYC. Eventually, she rallied up hundreds of activists from all over the world to start their own campaigns, and her work has been featured in the New York Times, BBC, CNN, and NBC. Welcome, Sophie, to my channel.
Thanks so much, Carrie. It's great to be here.
So please tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, for sure. And thanks so much for the nice introduction. Like you said, I'm an artist, a street artist specifically. I'm an activist and a founder. And yeah, like you mentioned, I'm the founder of Cat Calls of NYC and Chalk Back, which, to give a little bit more background, basically are initiatives against street harassment that use sidewalk chalk and digital media to raise awareness. Like you mentioned, also, I'm very involved in mental health advocacy, digital wellness, online safety. So I have a lot of different hats. But yeah, I'm excited to kind of tell you more about the different parts.
Of course. So the first question I have for you today is, you've been working in activism for such a long time. How do you cultivate and sustain that sense of purpose, not just for you, but for whole groups of people even?
Mm, that's such a great starter question. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot about what makes activism sustainable in the long run, especially because when I first started, when I was like 18, 19, I was not practicing sustainable activism. I was going like 24/7. I was like, I need to work every second of every day to get people mobilized, to talk about the issues I care about, to post as much as possible on social media. And I realized pretty quickly that that wasn't sustainable and that wasn't going to lead to a long career, and that wasn't going to lead to the most meaningful social change. So to answer your question, kind of the switches that I made after really burning out, having struggles of my own with mental health, we're realizing that the most important thing is the collective you're building. So yes, it's about contributing, it's about, getting campaigns done and focusing on your social media presence and events and activism, but it's also about taking a step back and letting others lead as much as you're leading. So I think, especially as a leader within the activism space, the most important thing that I've done has been to step back and kind of let others take the lead, and kind of like switch off and take time off, step back and step back in when it's needed. I think that's been one of the most important things, like taking time off and taking a step back and then joining back in. And also modeling that for other people. So you asked, like, how do I kind of like stay motivated and also motivate the collective? I would say modeling, moderation and not working 24/7 is really important for the whole Chalk Back movement and the Cat Calls of NYC group, showing that it's okay to take even like 2 months off. If you're in school and you're busy and you're in finals and you need to take 2 months off and then come back, that's totally fine. So really having like an accepting attitude towards whatever people need to maintain their mental health and maintain their energy for continued activism.
Yeah, that is definitely so important. And oh, you talked about how you formed a collective, and I've seen your website with Chalkback and Cat Calls of NYC. You have a leadership team, you have people running their own campaigns in different parts of the world. How is it that you get to meet all these like-minded people? Where are you finding them?
Yeah, I mean, that's the beautiful thing about social media. Like, social media has such negative sides, it has such positive sides. I have met basically everyone I know in Cat Calls of NYC and Chalk Back via Instagram or TikTok. So, it's completely online. It's very much based on people finding the account and really liking the mission and wanting to join in. And I'm so grateful for that because honestly, I've met some of my best friends too through this activism, through these online spaces. I find that, yeah, social media is a great tool for connecting with like-minded people who are also trying to advocate for the same thing that you're advocating for. Yeah.
Hmm. And that kind of segues into my next question for you. So not just Chalkback, but a lot of these newer or younger activism platforms, organizations are using social media. For example, even the Malala Fund. I mean, I don't even have to give Malala introduction, but she's an advocate, one of the most well-known advocates for education. She is very active on Twitter, she's very active on Instagram, and she makes comments on other people's posts. So, in your opinion, what would you say, other than the fact that you get to meet a lot of people through social media, what are the opportunities and the challenges for activism nowadays when it comes to using digital platforms?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I guess, yeah, like you're saying, in terms of opportunities, and also during the pandemic, with things going online and there being kind of this new environment where it's really normal to spend a lot of time online in addition to in person. It's normal to get on a Zoom call, probably more than it was before the pandemic. I think it gives young activists access to like kind of like quote unquote high level people or people in like positions of power in organizations. Maybe they wouldn't have taken a coffee meeting, but they'll get on like a 20-minute Zoom call or something like that. I think LinkedIn and other social media platforms can be really great, like networking spaces for young activists. And I think it's kind of this equalizing ground too, because it doesn't matter if you're like just starting an initiative or, gaining traction online, or if you're kind of like a more renowned activist like Malala, for example. I do think there's kind of this equalizing space where you can comment on the same posts and have certain interactions because the online space creates the opportunity for that.
Mm,
So I would say that's a great opportunity. Also connecting based on like interests and subject area, connecting with other activists who are fighting for the same thing is just really easy online on social media. Um, in terms of the challenges, I mean, it's just like the amount of noise, I think, right? So it's like in some ways it's so exciting. You get to connect with so many amazing people. And then in other ways, it becomes so overwhelming that it's hard to even make meaningful connections because of the volume of connections. Same
mhm,
thing, I think, in general with scrolling on social media. It's hard to pay attention to each post. It's hard to care about all of these different issues. Even if you really do care about these issues, it's hard with the structure of social media, scrolling past each thing to actually meaningfully engage. So I worry sometimes that even though social media is great for making connections and networking, the connections aren't as meaningful or deep as they could be because of just the pure quantity of them.
mhm.
Yeah, I don't know.
And
What do you? I'm curious what you think too. I mean, you're a young person using social media in the online space, so I can imagine it would resonate with you also.
mhm. I mean, yeah, I think every young person who uses social media has experienced that doom scroll process of just like infinite posts, and you cannot pull yourself out of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely. And I think this is just for founders, but when you have so much examples that are very accessible to you, it's hard not to compare yourself to the achievements of other people. And with that, I feel like maybe it's just important for you to step back and just look at your own path. It's not easy knowing that, or doubting yourself, or coming to, or facing with challenges that you're like, oh, why can't I solve this? Other people are, doing better, they're growing faster than me. I think to really like overcome that, and I'm pretty sure you've experienced this too, is to step back, take time for yourself, and remember that everyone's different, and that you can do well in whatever field you're doing without being someone else.
Oh my God, no, I feel that so much. I was thinking as you were talking about people who are generous enough to post the rejections they face on social media. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but I'm always so grateful and so appreciative when big founders who I look up to and I'm like, oh my God, they're doing so well. They're just, crushing it. And then they also post their failures and their rejections and all of that. And I know like I haven't done that in the past because I think I've gotten like insecure when I get a rejection or upset. So I don't want to share it with the world. And I think many of us don't. But creating the full picture, which is, kind of the core of half the story too, which is how we connected.
Yeah.
Allowing people to see the full picture of successes and challenges is really important, especially to share with fellow founders. Like it's not all easy, and it takes a lot of rejections to get to the successes.
Yeah, that sounds really awesome. I've actually never seen people post their rejections, but I wish people did that more.
Yeah, yeah. I'll send you some posts if I can find them because I find that it's like these people who I think of as like perfect and kind of like the picture of success. So it really, yeah, I find it really meaningful when they do that.
Hmm. Okay, so we did talk kind of about digital wellness earlier, and we also did talk about how we met at the Digital Summers Academy, which by the way, awesome organization. Please check them out. I'll link them somewhere under this podcast. But they've been really advocating for teen mental health and digital safety. So you said that you are also advocating for these things. Could you just talk a bit about your work in these areas?
Yeah, for sure. So for me, the focus on teen mental health and digital safety has come kind of organically from my activism work because I work with so many young people. I work with teens all the time, and I work in the online space all the time. So it came from like noticing that activists online, and in particular teen activists, are really struggling not only with stuff like doom scrolling and FOMO and just like the normal things that happen online, but also with stuff like online harassment, abuse online, cyber stalking, deep fakes. I was noticing that there were all of these issues that were targeting teens, and that in particular were targeting activists who were being brave enough to speak up about challenging issues. So I became really passionate about kind of advocating in an intersectional way for all of the different ways that young people are facing challenges online and with their mental health, and how those things are all interconnected. And for me, it was also really personal because I faced a cyber stalking campaign in response to my activism online. So I really wanted to find a way, as I was dealing with that, to also help other people, because that behavior can be so isolating. Um, I think in general, online spaces can be really isolating, and then also struggling with mental health can be really isolating. So the two together just kind of create this perfect storm. So yeah, my advocacy work around that is really within Chalk Back and Cat Calls of NYC, having mental health calls, having check-ins, and talking about the different types of struggles that happen in relation to activism, mental health, and the online space, very specifically.
Mm-hmm. And this is kind of not a personal question, but a very specific question. So, one thing I found that I tend to sometimes struggle with when it comes to mental health is just being or just realizing that I am struggling. I don't know
Yeah.
if that makes sense. So,
Yeah.
do you ever get that sometimes? Like, do you ever work until you're burnt out and not realize it until you've reached that point where you can't go anymore?
Absolutely, 100%. I think it's so normal to, like, be so zoned out and just, like, not even be in touch enough with, like, your emotions and yourself, and kind of go through the motions and not realize that you're burnt out, not realize that you're having, like, various mental health challenges. I know for me, during the pandemic, I was really struggling with anxiety and depression, and I didn't even, like, have really the labels for that, or I didn't know what to look out for, or burnout even. I didn't really know what the signs for burnout were. So I think that's another reason why advocacy is so important, because maybe you're burnt out or depressed or anxious and you don't know it. And it's like you can look at, okay, here are the here are the 5 things to start to look out for. And here's when you might want to take your first step back to just give yourself a little space. I totally resonate with that. It's hard to know what to look out for, and it's hard to realize when you're facing like a mental health challenge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and definitely I feel like the amount of posts or educational articles I've read on mental health has definitely helped me understand it better and be able to apply it to myself daily. So whoever is out there that's running activism campaigns regarding to mental health, I love you. Please keep doing what you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
The next question I've got for you is kind of related to art in general. I think you aren't just doing art for your Instagram accounts, you also have exhibitions using art as a medium, but obviously still related to activism. So I just have a question. Is there anything that you think makes art as a medium of storytelling for social issues so captivating?
Mm. Absolutely. Like I think art is probably one of the best mediums for storytelling, especially when it comes to social justice. And I think that also relates back to mental health. At least for me, and I think for a lot of other activists, art is like a tool for healing, and it's a tool for kind of coming to terms with your own story or other people's stories and seeing the world in a different way. So I think kind of creativity and imagination in general are such core parts of activism, and also such core parts of art, which I think is why many activists turn to art as a form for storytelling and activism. Yeah, so I think that art is absolutely like one of the most captivating tools for social justice advocacy. And it's something that helps support your mental health and healing. It's like an all-in-one tool. I love I love art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And for me, art has always been a way to self-express. So having people or seeing people out there who are using it for larger platforms or to amplify bigger voices or more voices is just it's wonderful to see. And
Yeah.
especially about your art, one thing I realized or kind of saw is that you're doing a transformation from of harassment or bigotry, which is ugly and it's cruel, but you're transforming it into something beautiful like chalk art. And I feel like there's something special about that. Maybe that's why part of your work resonated with so many people online. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, thank you thanks for saying that. That's a really nice way to describe it. I think something I've always loved about Cat Calls of NYC and Chalkback is the bright colors of chalk and also how simple it is, right? Like sidewalk chalk is something that kids start using when they're 5. Like everyone can kind of like play with sidewalk chalk. And it's this very childlike medium. And we're capturing these things, like you said, bigotry, and also things that take away your innocence. Like a lot of times, at least in New York, girls as young as 11, 12, 13 are starting to get harassed on the streets. And it's this moment of, having kind of like your innocence to having this thing projected on you and facing harassment, being sexualized, objectified. So I think there's something really beautiful in the medium of catching that like kind of like conflict between innocence and then harassment. So yeah, I think it's really captured with the chalk, it's captured with the colors. It's funny too, like a lot of people get upset by the chalk. A lot of people are really like angry and think it's disgusting and vulgar and graffiti. And that's also like another ironic situation because it's literally sidewalk chalk. It's washable. It's not permanent. They could come wash it away with water. But yeah, so it kind of like captures that irony too of like people are so upset by this childlike medium, but they're not realizing the deeper problem of harassment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because in reality, they should be angry at the fact that things like this is being said to young women all over the city. And it's not really the art that they're mad at. I think it's the fact that they're being called out for it or they don't want to confront the issue.
Exactly. Yeah, they don't want to pay attention to what's wrong. They just want to kind of like live blissfully ignorant. I totally agree.
Mm-hmm. Okay, moving on. I kind of want to talk about your work as just a nonprofit organizer. So as an entrepreneur, I know you've said it in an interview, I think with Forbes, that you kind of view it as entrepreneurship. And as someone who is also trying to make startups, I'm trying to build an app with my friends in my city. Yeah, uh, it's been quite a journey so far. I can tell you more about that
Yeah.
later. But I guess like the number one thing I want to ask you is, have you ever struggled with building up your own organization, or specifically, have you ever experienced challenges when it comes to funding, when it comes to utilizing social media, or just like even producing things that genuinely push forward causes?
Mm. So much. Yeah. Like, yes, yes, yes. I think starting, honestly, yeah. I want to hear about your startup and the app because that sounds really exciting. I think being a founder and creating something new is exciting and inspirational, and also one of the most challenging things you can do because there are so many startups, because there's so much competition, especially in the nonprofit world, because there's so much competition over funding, like you're saying. It's really challenging to create a successful, especially I would say a successful startup nonprofit and get enough funding to do that and to scale from, say, a youth-led movement to a successful nonprofit. So there have been many challenges. We've had a lot of challenges with funding. At this point, we're mostly volunteer-based. Over the years, we've raised money and we've done campaigns, we've done some paid programming, but it hasn't turned into like a scalable nonprofit where there are a full-time staff, which is okay. I'm still able to, do freelance work related to Chalkback and Cat Calls of NYC. So I'm still, like able to kind of work with Chalkback and Cat Calls of NYC and also make a living doing my own work. Um, but yeah, I would say funding has been the most challenging part. Um, Oftentimes funders want to see a very specific type of impact that relates to numbers and data. And within Chalkback, so much of our impact is about art, it's about community. And yes, we are able to, have certain numbers in terms of the impact we're creating and the change we're making. But I think documenting the impact in a way that funders want to see has been difficult. And it's kind of forced us into a box that was not really like meant for Chalkback, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think transitioning from Chalkback being this organic, large youth-led movement using Instagram and Chalk to being a nonprofit that was seeking funding and applying for grants was a huge transition and was really difficult. Which is okay,
Mhm.
but like, so really it has to do with like making the transitions and being like, okay, this maybe isn't meant to be right now. So the leaders within Chalkback are going to do other things and also work on a volunteer basis within Chalkback and push it forward in this way. So it's about kind of being flexible and working with the challenges that you come upon.
Mhm. Would you say you're still hoping to, scale it up though, scale up Chalkback?
Yeah, definitely. I think with the right opportunity, with the right people involved, I think if we had certain opportunities for funding, we could absolutely still scale. And we're still very active in, various spaces. We're active within the UN, we're active in schools. So I think there's definitely still the opportunity to scale. It's just about, yeah, kind of like what comes our way and keeping an eye out for that.
Mhm. Because partly I think, especially organizations when it comes to community and nonprofit, you don't really want to sacrifice your mission goal. Like you don't wanna try to make profit or try to impact people for the sake of impacting people. So yeah, that's definitely very difficult.
Yeah, no, definitely. And there have been certain situations too where we've worked with certain companies, or we've been approached by certain companies that want us to do something specific for them in return for a grant or funding that haven't aligned with our mission or our values. And we don't do that because we want to stay true to the mission and the values, and also the survivors whose stories we're sharing. It's about them and it's about the community. So if we have to, work harder to get other funding, better to do that than to kind of compromise our values. That's been a big thing.
Mhm.
Um,
Yes, stay strong.
yes.
All right. The next question, or last question actually, that I wanted to ask you is, so my YouTube channel is dedicated for Gen Z. I want to make it a channel so that people all over the world, especially young people, can look at all these role models that I've interviewed and just know a bit more about how life could be for them. Um, so my last question for you today is, if you had to give your best piece of advice for Gen Z out there, what would it be?
Ooh, I like this question. And I love Gen Z because so I'm like on the border of Gen Z, I guess, and millennial. I was born in 1996.
Oh,
But so my best piece of advice, I feel like Gen Z is so inherently passionate and creative and driven. So I think my piece of advice for Gen Z would be, follow your creativity, follow your passion, because it's all there. And I really feel like Gen Z is going to change the world. So don't like try not to get jaded and try not to get too skeptical because of the forces that are being pushed on you. Keep following your creativity and your passion. And I think like, be flexible and be creative, and that'll get you to really powerful places within your career, within your causes that you're working on. I think for me, yeah, like continuing even as there are challenges and even as there are funding challenges and Chalkback doesn't fit into certain boxes. Continuing to, try new iterations and try new things has been, I think, what's made it so successful in the end and what continues to make it thrive. So yeah, for my advice for Gen Z would be to follow your passion and creativity.
yeah, and that's great advice. And I hope that for any young activist out there or Gen Z out there who's trying to make a difference and start something. Yeah, and that's the end of the episode. Thank you again to Sophie for talking to me. I loved our conversation today, and I hope I wish for all the best for you and Chalkback and Cat Calls of NYC.
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much, Carrie. It was great talking to you, and I'd love to hear more about all of your work soon too.
Awesome. Okay, let me stop recording.